Hey everybody, sorry I was muted, but we are live. Thank you all for being here. I want to welcome everybody to a Care First approach to end homelessness. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So thank you all for being here, and a special thank you to Kareem Sali for setting this all up. My name is Bubba Fish, and I'm the current vice chair of the city's advisory committee on housing and homelessness. So I'd like to first welcome and thank our Vice Mayor Yasmine-Imani McMorrin and our Council Member Freddy Puza for putting on this discussion to raise awareness of what's going on in our community and how we can all help and be a part of it. For those who might not be aware, at the end of last year, 4 days before Christmas, at the direction of 3 of our council members, um, the city held a public hearing to discuss implementing a so-called anti-camping ordinance in Culver City, similar to what you have seen happen in LA City with 4118, where unhoused folks are prohibited from existing essentially in certain parts of the city. The result of that public hearing, despite our protests, was that those council members directed the staff to prepare this ordinance, and now it will be voted on at the next city council meeting, along with the declaration of a state of emergency for homelessness in Culver City. So I'd like to open up, we obviously want to hear from our council members. So first I'd like to ask you, Vice Mayor, how did we get here, sort of high level?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bubba, and thanks to all y'all at home for taking time out of your busy days to just plug in with us and find out a little bit more about what's going on in the city. Deeply appreciate your time. Like Bubba said, my name is Yasmine-Imani McMorrin. I currently serve as the Vice Mayor for Culver City. And in terms of, how we got here, elections. We need to vote, y'all. Unfortunately, the progressives have had the majority for maybe about 4 years or so in the city. I've been on the council since 2020. We just had an election in 2022. Very grateful to serve alongside my colleague, Freddy Puza, who we'll hear from in just a bit. But the council majority has shifted. And in many cases, I think I think it's important to state that no one is happy with homelessness. I'm not happy with homelessness. I believe that housing is a human right. And I do think it is a policy failure that in the richest, nation, richest space in this country, that we have folks who are living on the street, children, veterans, victims of domestic violence, our neighbors and community members that are falling into homelessness. So, some folks would, while Councilmember Puza and I believe that we must invest in housing and care first solutions to truly address these systemic housing failures. Some folks would just rather kind of push folks out or like move poverty sort of out of view. And so it's sort of easier. It's maybe not cheaper, probably not cheaper to do that, but a lot of folks just move there because it's more immediate. It requires less planning, less infrastructure, et cetera, to do. And so some neighbors who I'm sure are well-meaning and who care deeply about safety in our community, which of course Councilmember Puza and I do as well, sort of believe that sweeps and this direction is the right way to go, which is why I'm so glad we're here today to sort of kind of lay out why housing is the correct way to go first. Data bears that out. The studies bear that out. A recent study came out talking about how expensive sweeps are, how much harm and violence it brings to our neighbors. And not to mention the folks, it has to be hard to sort of see folks, in distress as those sweeps are happening as well for employees on the employee side. So, I mean, in a nutshell, we got to make sure that we get out and vote our values. But there's just been a shift in power and dynamics on the council, and that's pretty much how we got here. One more thing that I'd like to elevate that I didn't get to is that, so with the shift in the council, which happened on the 12th of December, one of the first things the new council majority did was roll back a $25 minimum wage for our healthcare workers. I think that's important to elevate because our healthcare workers who did so much for our community in the midst of COVID-19, as we're still navigating COVID-19 and the new variants that crop up, we had asked for that to come back in the summer of 2022. Unfortunately, it came back in November of 2022. And so we voted on it the night that the new council was sworn in. And one of the first acts that was done by that council was to roll back that minimum wage. And I think that's important to elevate because when we know that the cost of a one-bedroom apartment in Culver City being $2,500, $3,000 a month, and we can't even allow for our healthcare workers right in our community to earn $25. All of these things are connected: wages, quality of life, and how we treat folks who are really at the margins is really critical. So thanks for that time.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to tip it to you, Freddie, because for people who aren't familiar, can you help us understand what does housing first mean or care first?
Yeah, thanks, Bubba. Again, Freddy Puza, council member for Culver City. Just want to go back a little to also provide a little. There was a homeless issue before the pandemic happened. Then the pandemic happened, which had a great effect. And we're still actually in the pandemic, and it has increased since then. We knew there'd be an economic downturn. We're in that moment right now. We're in a crisis. There's no way to think about it any differently. And to what Yasmine said before, no one wants to see people suffer. No one wants people to not have the resources and housing. But it's all about solutions and it's about systems. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But and then also Yasmine, Vice Mayor McMorrin, thank you for uplifting the minimum wage that was not increased, really supported that. And affordability is, one of the issues. It's connected because it's one of the issues of why we're here. So housing first and a care first approach. Housing first is a research-based solution. It's evidence-based and it prioritizes permanent supportive housing. We know that by and large is the number one solution to help this situation. Providing someone with a home is tremendous, has tremendous value for people and it gives the person the flexibility, the autonomy, and the tools they need to remain unhoused. It gives them the dignity to have that. Once they start to, get that autonomy and balance back, they can start doing some of the other works. We know that the number one contributing factor to homelessness is lack of affordable housing. There's contributing factors like addiction issues, substance abuse, mental health issues, so they can get the services that they need. So care first approach is always doing outreach, building the relationship. Some people who are unhoused have become service resistant because the system that we've had in the past, which is based in punishment and incarceration, they don't trust it. Why would they trust a system that has continuously let them down? So a system of care, tries to create pathways for them to get into housing and services.
Thank you, Freddie. Thank you, council member. That idea of there are those folks out there, right, who have been burned so many times by the system that doesn't give them housing, that doesn't give them what they need, and do have, stop sort of interfacing with it or having faith in it. And then there are those folks who are ready and willing to get sheltered. And just as a quick, aside, like those folks are sometimes outside of my apartment. I've interacted with someone I know who was like, I'm ready, I want shelter. I called the county and there's zero even temporary shelter beds available. The city had to get him a temporary motel voucher, and it was, it's temporary. So by the 27th of December, he was out on the streets again. And so when I think about one of these anti-camping ordinances, I go, so we're sweeping him, and where is he supposed to go, right? Like, what if we don't have those units, if we don't even have temporary, which isn't even adequate, shelter available, where are they supposed to go? So I appreciate all that context. And so I guess my next question for y'all is we have these two items right now: the declaration of a state of emergency and this anti-camping ordinance. So we've seen the state of emergency, like Mayor Bass in LA, like did something similar. And then we have this anti-camping ordinance. What is the differences between those two? I'll give this one to the vice mayor. Can you explain the differences between these two and how they interact with each other?
Thanks so much, Bubba. And real quick, before we move on, another big piece in this process of how we solve homelessness and how we combat and prevent folks from falling into homelessness, we must have unhoused voices, currently unhoused or very recently unhoused voices at our policy table to ensure that what we're trying to do actually works. I do recall, we both have had interactions where neighbors have reached out, or we've encountered neighbors who have been seeking housing or needing additional support. And it is difficult, even with me as vice mayor or previously as council member, to get folks into a motel or get to folks into temporary housing. The housing is just not there. And that is what we are missing. We are also missing critical voice at lived experience, or at, having those voices at the table. So in terms of the declaration or the ordinance, I mean, with no disrespect to staff or any of the efforts, because this is a crisis. This is absolutely an emergency, but to just say that it's an emergency and not have additional funding allocated specifically toward ensuring that folks are writing particular grants, like how we had someone write a grant to apply for the Home Key project, and then we were lucky enough to get that funding and get support from the county and the state with additional funds to make sure that we could purchase those motels, to make sure that we are actually providing resources and we're not just responding to symptoms of homelessness, right? So state of emergency or anti-camping ordinance, listen, I want to make sure that folks have a place to go and lay their heads at night. We don't think, I take it for granted more often than I should. Most recently, we just had these severe rainstorms in Southern California. My daughter told me today that some more are coming, unfortunately, and folks are out on the street. And the issue with a flashy, and of course, this is, again, no disrespect to any politicians. I am very excited about our neighboring mayor, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Freddy, Councilmember Puza, and I certainly lock arms in her intention to eradicate homelessness. That is something that we absolutely wholeheartedly believe should be done in the region. But we must make sure that there is housing. We cannot simply declare without adequate funding for staff. That is not law enforcement. That is not code enforcement. We need to make sure that there are folks that are actually going to be providing care, food, mental health resources, and just sweeping folks without a permanent place to stay. And another thing that I want to say about the sweeps is, unfortunately, in our city, we say we provide storage. And I found out very recently that we provide trash cans for our unhoused neighbors to store their items. After I'd asked that question from the dais, our mayor clarified to make sure that they were clean trash cans. The distinction was negligible to me, as I just can't imagine how dehumanizing that might be for someone who is already experiencing the brunt of the failure of so many systems, to have to then store their items in a trash can. So there's just so much more that needs to be done. It is absolutely an emergency. Councilmember Puza and I absolutely believe it is an emergency, but we also believe that we must have our Project Home Key online. That project was supposed to be online in November of this previous year. We have a by name list with over 70 unhoused neighbors who are ready to move in. They're excited about this housing. We moved that date to February. Now we're at an estimated open date of March. Again, I know construction delays happen all the time. I know that staff is working as hard as they can, but if we are rolling out an anti-camping, or if we are furthering sweeps, which according to the December meeting, which I unfortunately was out of town due to the holiday vacation, so I was not on that call, but did watch it. There were some sweeps ordered at that December meeting. If we are doing that without complimentary, providing permanent supportive housing, we are failing. We are unfortunately failing. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with setting folks up who are already dealing, again, with system failures, and setting them up for additional failures. So I'm really prayerful and hopeful that we will believe, the city says we have a care first approach. I mean, that might be how folks use the word progressive, but I am hopeful that we will show up for our neighbors who need our support in this crisis.
I think it's a really good opportunity right now to also point out what the prior councils have done to address this issue. It's actually set us up to the moment that we're at. So the first thing was to establish rent control and tenant protection, which is the foundation of preventing people from falling into homelessness by keeping them already in their homes. They've secured funding for the motel vouchers. They also have approved safe camping in 2020. They also approved the mobile crisis intervention unit. And then they, as Vice Mayor McMorrin mentioned, the Project Home Key, secured the funding for that. We need to get that up and running. That is a care first approach. Let's get that all up and running. Let's get it fully funded. We can have different conversations once that's all done. But historically, we have seen that we will put the enforcement part first. We always have a tendency just to put it onto the police. And that's not their charge. They're supposed to be fighting crime, not dealing with homelessness. And then all of a sudden, the deadlines and the for these different operations to go online gets pushed and pushed and pushed. But the enforcement part of it continues to be applied and just further harms people. So just want to include that part about the historic part of what the prior councils have done.
Thank you, Council Member. That is really helpful. Let's talk about those solutions more specifically, because I think they're really important. The permanent supportive housing units from Project Home Key, 78, I think, units that are both permanent supportive. I think maybe half of them are permanent supportive units and half of them are transitional, right? Are for those to get folks off the street and into transitional housing where we find them a more permanent solution. So we know that's being built. Obviously, it's faced severe delay. We passed by it on Sepulveda, those two motels right next to each other. I think for safe parking and safe camping, people want to know that did get passed, right, Council? In I think you said 2020, Freddy. I don't know if maybe it was 2020. I have something here that says 2022, but that did pass Council. Could you guys, or could either Council Member Puza or Vice Mayor McMorrin help us understand what were some of the roadblocks in getting safe camping and safe parking ready? I know in the Committee on Housing and Homelessness, we ask for an update from staff every single time we're in that meeting, and they say we are focused on Project Home Key. And that is our entire focus. And there's not that many of them. There's like 3 or 4 full-time staff on homelessness. So can y'all illuminate for us the inner workings? Like, how has this not already been done for those who are curious?
I'm happy to jump in here. I'm pretty sure that safe parking was decided or voted on before I got on council. I think I recall making a comment about it before I was on the council, but I know that we brought up safe parking when the now mayor, but at the time council member was proposing pallet housing. Folks know I'm not a super fan of pallet housing because the spaces are smaller than jail cells. And I just believe that if we wouldn't have it for ourselves, and perhaps we should not be investing so much money in these temporary structures where they're liable to flood, and there's been fires in some of the tiny or pallet homes that other cities have had. So I just had severe concerns about such a capital investment and something that really wasn't permanent housing, really wasn't bringing folks really on the path that sort of we want them to be, right? We want them to be in permanent affordable housing. So something like a Project Home Key was something that I thought was really important to prioritize. And former Mayor Alex Fish and Councilmember Fish and I were on the Housing and Homelessness Subcommittee. We've had some staffing changes in the past year or so. So there's been a kind of reorganization on the city side. But at the time when we were discussing this, particularly from 2020 to 2022, I feel like anytime I say that, it sounds like I'm saying 2022 back to back, but the year 2020 through the past year, we had this matrix. The former director had this matrix of projects that they were pursuing, and it was really a conversation about staff, bandwidth and prioritization of what projects were feasible to get done. I have no regrets in terms of prioritizing, over 70 beds with that has permanent housing. And when it finally comes online, y'all, I'm so excited for folks to benefit from like all of the facilities and the mental health resources. And they even have a dog run. They're putting in greenery. Like, it really is a beautiful space that, I would be proud to live, right? We shouldn't expect for folks to, have to hold their things in a garbage can or live in a space that is smaller than a jail cell and expect for folks to be happy with it. I don't think that that's the kind of standard we should be upholding. So I'm excited about Project Home Key. Apparently, recently there's been more investments that on the staff side, and so I'm excited to see that investment come through. I'm excited to see those job descriptions updated and those key performance indicators updated, so that we can really make sure that the accountability piece is there, and that we can make sure that folks are really being supported. And really, another thing that I want to raise up is that we need unhoused voices to make sure that these projects are really a success, because that is missing. As much as I'm excited about it, and I'm like, yes, this is this is the direction we should go, I don't have that lived experience, and I think it's important to ensure that we know that the programs and the outreach that we're doing is successful is by having that check, making sure that we have folks that are having that lived experience at the table. I'm maybe, Freddy, you want to give us an update on mobile crisis?
Yeah, so the mobile crisis intervention unit was approved and is trying to get online. So they're in the 6-month period to hire people and get it staffed up. But this is where you call a crisis hotline when someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, if someone is unhoused, if there's domestic violence, other things like that. And so, a trained clinician or a trained civilian or someone will come out, medical professional will come out to deal with the situation. This is an alternative to police. Police have been, no fault of their own, or a little bit of their own, but have been made the first responders to every situation. And I've done the Civilians Police Academy. They don't want to be responding to every single solitary thing. They're not properly trained for dealing with the unhoused, but they've been charged with that. So this will be an alternative, a way to really outreach to people. Sometimes when the police show up, an armed officer, that person might have a relationship to law enforcement, or it might accelerate them or activate them to see a gun. So it's nice to have someone else who has the right training and the right background to deal with the situation. There may be times when the police might have to be called. So there may be that. But let's, the care first approach. And so this is gonna be a great solution. The thing is, we need to make sure not only does it need to get up and running, but we need to make sure it's fully funded in perpetuity. So that will be really essential and really exciting. There are long-term and short-term solutions. I wish there was an easy answer to this issue that's been building for decades, but there's just not. And so, this is one of those things that it's exciting. We have to dare to dream, to do things different, to imagine different ways to get different outcomes. Because if we keep on using the same strategy, which isn't getting the results or the outcomes we want, we're just gonna repeat those. So we have to think about all these different ways. We have to dare to think differently.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, I think what we're hearing is that we're upping our staff for our housing department. We are investing in these actual proven solutions, but we're also pursuing these very, very harmful strategies that we're frankly completely ill-equipped to pursue, because not only are they going to be harmful, but they're going to be harmful because we don't have these other solutions, proven solutions in place. So I guess my question to the two of you is, how do we as advocates stand up to this? How do we say, this is going to be harmful, what you're doing. Like, how do we raise our voices, and how do we make ourselves useful so that we have as few, unhoused folks as possible impacted by something that we know is going to be really, really damaging? Is there anything we can do? That'd be my next question.
Before we, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm the queen of the pivot tonight. But before we shift there, I know that Councilmember Puza just raised mobile crisis. And the reason why I want to sort of circle back to that really quick is because and not too long ago, I think actually the neighboring city council district in Los Angeles, a young Black man, a father, a high school, I believe, or educator. I'm not sure if it was high school or not. Something is coming in my brain saying high school. His name was Keenan Anderson, was killed by LAPD just this year. And I believe it was after a car accident, or he was maybe having some sort of a mental crisis, or I'm not sure what the details are. There were other individuals killed. I just want to raise their names: Takar Smith and Oscar Sanchez across Los Angeles. They might have all had something to do with mental health, or they might have not. I believe the neighboring, the CD11 incident with Mr. Anderson has to do with mental health. And it's just so important for us to invest in these tools so that we can have, we for so long, we've invested in one metric of punishment and force and compliance, right? Those have been the tools that we have in our toolbox. Police arrest and incarcerate. They ticket and incarcerate. Those are the tools that they have. They might do some community outreach, but their major thrusts are ticket and arrest. And we have a wide breadth of needs in our community, and we have to fund our cities in the way that provide our neighbors, particularly the ones who are in the most need, someone who is having a mental health crisis, someone who deserves the benefit of the doubt or grace in that moment, so that they're met with folks who know how to de-escalate, know how to speak to folks in a way, or have received the training, as Councilmember Puza said. So I just wanted to lift those names up tonight, because as a Black woman in this country, it is just tough. It's just tough navigating this world, knowing, having Black men in my family. It's just tough. So I just want to raise that, because it's so critical to the work and informing why it's so important. We're not saying that housing first just for fun. It has real life implications, and we need to make sure that we are funding things that take care of folks and make sure that folks are safe and well and their needs are met. In terms of what can advocates do, stay involved. It's cool on the political side, come to council meetings. I think Councilmember Puza is getting ready to have his Fridays with Freddy, and the bike rides start back up again. I'm starting a book club. I also host community care conversations, where we dream of new systems, new solutions to the things that we might need in our community, with a centering on Black, Indigenous, folks of color, LGBTQ folks, disabled folks who are marginalized, traditionally marginalized in any way, to make sure that those voices are centered, because we know in our systems that is not always the case. But we just need folks to show up and stay involved, not just when it only impacts you and your loved ones, but also for your neighbors. I say this a lot from the dais, and I don't know, sometimes I feel like I get on people's nerves, but I feel like we are each other's business. The well-being of Councilmember Puza, the well-being of Vice Chair Fish, my neighbors who are unhoused, my daughter, her friends, our well-being is tied up in each other's well-being. And so we have to show up when unfortunately someone is killed. We have to show up when someone is being displaced. And when we're saying that it's not forced, but as a person of color, as a Black woman, if police are present, the power dynamics of that exchange are off. If a police officer is present, or any law enforcement officer, it ups the stakes of the interaction, and it makes it far less, even as someone who's an attorney, even as someone who's an elected official. If I'm engaging with a law officer, I am going to listen to what they say, because I've seen far too many examples of what happens to people when they don't. And I'm not putting on, this is real talk. And for us to say, well, law officers are present for staff, and not understand that that has a impact on the safety that people feel. I just, it's just tough to hear that because it's not centering those who are closest to the issue. And perhaps they have a solution. Perhaps they have a suggestion of how we might make sure that those exchanges go well. I mean, when you just think about it, this is where folks are living. If someone is coming into your bedroom, which is where I am right now, if someone is coming into your bedroom and is demanding that you throw things away, you probably wouldn't be super happy about that. Is demanding that you put your things in a garbage bin for storage. It's just a human reaction to be a little perhaps agitated that someone is coming into your space and making demands of you, and you have so little choice, so little agency. So just a dehumanization in how we talk about our neighbors and folks who are, again, I keep talking about systems that are failing folks, because some folks don't, they believe life is fair because it has been fair to them. But that is not the experience of many folks. And I just hope that we make room for the fact that there are folks who experience this world. There are folks who experience law enforcement. There are folks who have had a different lived experience, and that we make space for that in our policy planning, so that we can make sure that the intention that we have is actually realized, that we're actually having the care and the hope that, we intend.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Freddie. I was gonna turn it over to you as well. You're welcome to respond to that. Or we also wanted to ask about, are there any risks that the city is incurring with these sweeps that they're proposing?
Yeah, thanks. I'll get to that, but before I do think, to pick up with riffed off what Vice Mayor McMorrin was saying, it's very patriarchal and harmful for housed people to assume what they know is best for unhoused folks. So that's why we want to reiterate, really listening and working with people who have the lived experience in that area. Also community safety is so important, and it is doing that outreach and getting out of our silos, getting out of our homes and reaching out. When we create stable communities, when we have affordable communities, when we allocate resources so everyone has what they need to thrive and survive, we won't have a need on these other bodies to serve and protect, that we can do this together. So I think that really outreaching, go onto either Vice Mayor McMorrin or myself, our social media accounts to keep updated, and other resources are available out there. There is, these policies are not only harmful, but they might open the city up to potential litigation, according to recent case law, Martin versus Boise and some other things. So we do have to be mindful of that. Some people in the city are understandably concerned about litigation. And so we really need to make sure that that is, some part of this conversation as we move forward as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. So one thing I do want to plug, and then I'll turn it back over to you two for any last thoughts. We do have the homeless count, which the Advisory Committee on Housing and Homelessness is helping staff and LAHSA organize. That's going to be an internal count on January 25th, which means unlike prior to the pandemic, we're not going to be having volunteers participating in the count for a variety of reasons. COVID is surging right now, but also we're keeping it a small team to keep the consistency. And what we're doing is, we're going out with those teams that have been performing the count and sort of observing it. The committee is observing it as they're doing it. So that's coming up in not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. In this previous homeless count, we saw a 62% spike from 216 people to 350 people. And the percent who were sheltered fell from 23% to 11%. So we saw some really bad news in the last count, which was expected considering we hadn't had a count in 2 years. So there are a lot of limitations with the homeless count and things that it doesn't count everyone. It's not, but we're hoping to get some good data from that. So I'd like to turn it back over to you two for any final thoughts, and maybe talking about just why again we're against this ordinance, and what you want advocates to do next. I mean, we're going to be there at that council meeting. Feel free to plug it, and make sure people are, I'm sure are registered to speak and all of that. But yeah, I'll turn it over to you two.
When I campaigned this year and talked door to door with people, so many people said that they understood that this is an emergency, that this is a crisis, and they want solutions that are humane and treat people with dignity, so they can get, thrive and survive in their lives. Systems of punishment holds people back. What little they have, they'll get less. And so what I'm advocating for and what I'm passionate about is systems of care to help uplift people. So I, couldn't get, I couldn't vote for these items because I didn't see that pathway. I want to see minimum of the safe camping to go online, the mobile crisis intervention unit, and the Project Home Key to go fully online. Let's see how that's going. Let's have benchmarks 6 months, 1 year to see how those are doing. See what are the, look at our key our performance indicators. Let's do that first. And let's give people an opportunity to actually have pathways to, real housing. Let's get them, I'm so excited for Project Home Key to go live in March. We know, that could be pushed even further. So it doesn't make sense to put the cart before the horse and talk about the enforcement piece without having a place for people to go. We can't tell people where they can't go if we don't know where they can go in the first place. I hope that we have a regional approach, working with the county, working with the supervisor, working with mayors, Bass, and the council members in Council District 5 and 11, because we need a regional approach to this. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time tonight. And please stay involved and come to council meetings and come to Fridays with Freddy.
Thanks, Councilmember.
Sorry, but just to, +1 to everything that Councilmember Puza just stated. We need more specificity. While again, we lock arms with Los Angeles Mayor Bass. We support our local elected Supervisor Mitchell, Assemblymember Bryan, our state Senator Lola Smallwood Cuervas, and their intention to support. And we look forward to further collaboration, particularly toward paths to housing, paths to safe camping, and making sure that we truly have spaces for folks to get outside of this rain and come inside and have a foundation again to build a life. So we need specificity in a state of emergency or the ordinance. Again, without the relevant or requisite housing, I would not feel comfortable voting for any ordinance that okays any sweeps or anti-camping of any kind, anti-camping enforcement of any kind. There would need to be additional funding for staff, I think we need more staff, but we need to have specific KPIs and job descriptions that specifically say that they are going to write grants for housing, provide supports for folks, our unhoused neighbors. And we need clear metrics. How will we know when we're out of this state of emergency? How will we know when we're successful? Is it just with the sweeps? Is that the metric of success? Because for me, it's making sure that folks are housed and that there are spaces and places for folks in Culver City across all income levels, particularly for folks who are unhoused, but across all income levels. In Los Angeles County, the highest group that is experiencing unhoused or falling into homelessness is our seniors, the most vulnerable, our foster youth. Deal with disproportionately high rates of homelessness. Homelessness is also, tends to have it's a racial issue. Black folks are less than 15 or 13% of Los Angeles County, and we make up 40% of folks who are unhoused. This is a critical issue that I am incredibly passionate about, that we are incredibly passionate about, but we must have clarity in terms of where our goals are. We need to have financial resources backing those goals, both in staff and making sure that the resources are there, that we are taking care of folks. A lot of, I could talk about this all day. So let me wrap up. Please stay engaged with us. Please know that we care deeply about our community, our entire community's well-being, which is why we care so deeply in Housing First, which is why we care so deeply in Care First, because that is a humane, compassionate response. Getting people housed is compassionate. Getting people housed is responding to this crisis and in the moment. So please stay involved with us. I know there's going to be a slide with our contact information. Willing to chat with everyone about this. This is important. We need to be engaging with one another. We need to be trusting with one another, and we need to be building with one another, because this is our community. This is our Culver City, and we are each other's business. Thanks so much for doing this, Bubba.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Puza. Thank you both. This is a really hard job. I think most people in Culver City recognize that this is a really, really hard job. And you two are standing up for not just those most vulnerable, you're standing up for a better vision for our city, a better, more welcoming city where everyone can thrive, where we invest in solutions and services and not harm and enforcement. That is a really hard fight when these, like you both mentioned, these systems have been perpetuated and strengthened for decades and decades and decades. So you are doing the hard work, and I think I speak for a lot of us that we're very, very grateful that you're at the helm. So thank you, and that you're doing your part. And with that, thank all of you for being here and for spending your evening learning about this with us. And hope to see you at the council meeting, where you can raise your voices and participate in this process. And yeah, thank you to Kareem Sali for setting this up, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thanks, y'all.